The vandalism at Jerusalem's Protestant cemetery is another tragic expression of the rise of extremism in Israel.
And despite that, the Christian community in Israel holds a key, I think, to creating peace in that nation.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here is your host and moderator.
Welcome, viewers. Thank you so much for joining us today for another show here. We appreciate you coming and being part of our conversation. My name is Andrea Luxton. I am the president of Andrews University, which is in Berrien Springs, Michigan, and I am today's moderator. I would like you to meet our panelists.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm senior professor of church history and ecumenics and special assistant to the president for ecumenical relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. I'm also an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Dan Levin. I'm blessed to serve as senior rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
And I'm Tom Plumley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, serving at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas.
Thank you very much. And now let's look at today's topic. On January the 1st, 2023, the historic Protestant cemetery on Mount Zion in Jerusalem was attacked by vandals. Pillars were toppled, crosses broken into pieces, and markers upended. The brazen perpetrators of the destruction did that work in broad daylight. The incident was captured on security cameras. The time-worn cemetery is just outside the walls of the old city and is owned by the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem. The issue today, then, for our panel is the implication of the incident. The attack drew condemnation from many quarters, including President Isaac Herzog and Chief Rabbi Ephraim Mervis. The World Council of Churches issued a statement claiming that the, quote, incident serves to underscore the grave concerns expressed repeatedly by the heads of churches in Jerusalem about increasing attacks and threats against the Christian community by extremist elements of Israeli society. Some called it a provocation of the Christian community in general, and certainly it serves as a reminder that Christians in Israel, whether Protestant, Roman Catholic, Greek Orthodox, Armenian, Coptic, Ethiopian, Syrian, or whatever, are very much a minority community in Israel and Palestine, where Christians currently comprise less than 2% of the population. So here are the questions we would ask our panelists to look at. Firstly, has there indeed been a pattern of, quote, increasing attacks and threats against the Christian community in Israel, as the World Council statement claims? If so, why, since Christians are such a tiny minority? Secondly, will the Christian population, caught as it is between far larger and often clashing Jewish and Muslim communities, continue to decline? Thirdly, or do Christian Israelis have a role to play, perhaps larger than their numbers would warrant, in finding reconciliation between people of all three faiths in that land, called holy by each of them? Some interesting questions there, and I would turn first of all to the rabbi to respond.
So first, I would say that this attack on the cemetery is repulsive, and there really aren't adequate words to describe my revulsion at what took place there. Certainly, we in the Jewish community know the horror of what it means to have a cemetery desecrated. That is a constant refrain and incident that we in the diaspora know all too well. Israel is undergoing a really complicated search for its own identity as it approaches the 75th anniversary of its independence. It is the first time in more than 2,000 years that Jews are empowered over their own identity and their own destiny. And when a disempowered people suddenly, and it's really only been in the last 50 years since even maybe the Six-Day War and Israel's survival of the Yom Kippur War, that we've realized that actually they can't destroy us. That reality of what it is to be empowered is a really new thing for the Jewish people. And what do we do with power and how we manage power is something that has been really in the forefront of political and moral and philosophical dialogue among Israeli intellectuals and even just the Israeli street, really for the last several decades. And I think that that's an important set of questions that needs to be answered, because with great power comes responsibility. If you read Israel's founding documents, Israel doesn't have a constitution, which is another problem, as you see in the modern Israeli political culture. But there are formational documents, one of which is its Declaration of Independence. And in the Declaration of Independence that was ratified on May 14, 1948, there is in very clear language a commitment that Israel will respect the freedom and the security of all the different religious faith traditions that call Israel their home. And that is a sacrosanct commitment. And the idea that that was not upheld in this particular situation is really horrible and tragic. Part of the beauty of Jerusalem is the mosaic it comprises between Jews and all of the different flavors of Christianity and different expressions of Muslim tradition. You know, I can stand on the rooftop in the Jewish quarter and I can see the holiest sites of the world's three Judeo-Christian Muslim traditions. I can see the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I can see the Dome of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I can see the Western Wall and the Temple Mount within shouting distance, literally shouting distance of each other. And that's the beauty of Jerusalem, and that needs to be preserved. What needs to be addressed is this radicalization of extremists in every religious sphere, whether it's Jewish or whether it's Muslim or whether it's Christian. My sense is that the attack on this cemetery had less to do with an anti-Christian sentiment and more to be wrapped up in the Israeli-Palestinian narrative, where anything non-Jewish is seen as, to use a Yiddish word, treif, right? Not kosher. And you see on the far, far right of Israeli society this idea of what's called price tag attacks. And that's to make up for an attack by Palestinians against Israelis. Oh, see, we can attack you back harder. And Israel needs to get its extremists under control, as do, I think, other religious traditions.
Thank you very much. Tom?
Thank you. Yes, I would agree. I think part of what prompted the vandalism is that it is not just Christianity, but the fact that most Christians in Israel are Arabic speaking, and many of them are Arabic in ethnicity. But what I wanted to speak about is an opportunity for the Christian community. You know, if we can just get past arguing among ourselves, usually, and within the Israeli context, it is accentuated, I think, about things that we've been arguing about literally for 2,000 years, about the nature of the Christ and things like that that preceded the Council of Chalcedon in what was it, 450 or 451. Israel's Ministry of Religious Affairs has an entire department that is dedicated and set up to arbitrate between the various Christian groups in Israel that continue to argue over conflicting rights and privileges in regard to particular holy sites and access to holy places and that sort of thing. Israel is a microcosm containing all of our Christian disagreements over the past 2,000 years, all of our bickering. But at the same time, it holds the key because it's not Muslim, it's not Jewish, and that's the primary conflict. It holds a key and for the possibility of getting past all of our own arguments and becoming peacemakers for the entire nation. For instance, almost no Christians are in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. They are not required to be in the army as most Israelis are, and that puts Christians then in a place where they don't get looked at quite the same way by the Muslim minority in the country. It also needs to be said that Christians generally have fled Palestinian-controlled parts of the nation due to persecution. So the Christian community in Israel is in an odd place. It is a shrinking minority. As I understand the demographic numbers, however, that shrinking is flattening out and perhaps turning around a little bit. I think there are opportunities among us if we would just get past our own stuff.
Okay, thank you. Well.
Yeah, I have to say that the situation in Israel is incredibly complex. There's no question about that, because in part it comes to the question of who the Israelis say that they want to be. It has the question of the future identity and what they plan for the country is extremely important to them, and I want to encourage continued discussion on that and success in that project. At the same time, I also recognize that within Israel, there are those fundamentalists, if you would, the right wing, even represented as with the current administration there, which in a sense push buttons in ways that I think are not helpful either to Israel or to the people that inhabit the land or Palestine or even Christians. I was privileged in 1999 to be able to be at Jerusalem and Bethlehem at the time of the Christmas season, just before the Christmas season, for a worship service on Bethlehem Square. And you had these machine guns pointing at you from the mosque towers, and you had Jewish people around with guns, and it was a very tense place. And in the middle of the service, Mr. Arafat came with sirens blaring and everything, and went up on the platform and took a chair in the center of the stage and had one of his ministers give a speech that he was supposed to be giving. His point in coming was to turn on the lights of the Christmas tree at that particular moment in time. It was a tense period, but I have to say I had been through a number of offices, the Armenians, the Greeks, the Catholics, the Episcopal office, the Lutheran office. There are 17 denominations that are recognized officially by the State of Israel. Mine's not one of them. Mine's not one of them. We're not recognized, although we are present. And, I worry a lot about our own presence, and not just the Assemblies of God, but I mean, a lot of evangelical and other Pentecostal groups are there. And, they're trying to bring people to Jesus, if you would. They're trying to convert Jews into Christians. Whatever you say about that, I think it is important to recognize that we are, in a sense, a minority, a very shrinking minority, and I have not seen any new stats that says it's growing, although it could be. But I do know that it was at one point about 13%, which I think was at around 2000, and it has shrunk down to about 2%. And that's really the case throughout the Middle East. The Christian presence is really greatly diminished throughout. But I do think that sometimes our eschatology, our understanding of the end of days and when the Lord will return and all of that, plays into the way that we respond to the realities in Israel that are not consistent either with Scripture or with the way we should be functioning as Christians. I do think that we have a lot of problems, as you say. There's a lot of differences even between the 17 different groups within Israel that the government recognizes. They have their issues, but they've also got issues with all younger churches. These churches will never be accepted by the Middle East Council of Churches, for instance, as legitimate because they've come lately and they have a different slant on the gospel than what the traditional historic churches do. So it's a very complex thing. And I think that the breakdown in some of this had to do with the destruction of this cemetery, or at least many of the stones in the cemetery. I have nothing to compare it with except in the oldest cemetery in Los Angeles, there was a gang that went through and did the same kind of things with all the stones, flipped them over, broke them up, and so forth. It was a horrible mess. But that is really radical gangsterism in a sense, is what I would call it.
Thank you. A very complex environment. Do we have are there any solutions?
Well, I think part of the solution is for, as it is in any kind of a conflict, what are we going to teach our kids? And, there's a tussle in Israel in the identity, and there are 15 million Jewish people on the planet, total. We have one small sliver of land in which Judaism is the dominant culture. It is a tiny sliver of land for a tiny people. And I think that there is amongst that people a sense of, this is our land, can you just leave us alone? We left and were kicked out and expelled from every dominant culture there is on the planet, from North Africa to Europe to Asia. And this is the one place we can call our own. And so I think there is the other side of that coin that creates a sense of chauvinism, a sense of intolerance, a sense of this is our land and you don't belong here, which is inappropriate and in fact wrong, given the complexity and the holiness to which the city of Jerusalem, the land of Israel, is attached by billions of people around the world. And so I think that we have to figure out how we teach our children to love the land of Israel, to rejoice in their return and in their sense of safety and security in that land, while at the same time making room for the religious expression. We are told that we're supposed to love the stranger and welcome the stranger. Yeah. Well, now that we're in power, we have to effect that in real life.
Thank you. Let's have a break.
We hope you're enjoying today's program. If you'd like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the vision and history of the program and we invite you to become a ministry partner, explore our Town Hall Estates healthcare facilities, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, we look forward to receiving your letters. You may write us at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. If you have a prayer request, please send it to prayerrequest@americanreligious.org. Thank you for writing and thank you for watching. Now, back to today's closing statements.
Welcome back, and a reminder that just as you've just heard, we love to hear from you. Please give us your suggestions, give us your ideas for programs, comment on what you are hearing and seeing. Let us know your opinions. And now we'll go to our closing comments. Mel.
I think cemeteries should be understood as sacred places regardless of what religion we're part of. And I think that to go around destroying markers within a cemetery is really an abomination that needs to be condemned wherever it is and for whatever reason. And I would say that even though we might be wanting to be tolerant of people who differ from us, I think it's really important to teach our families, our kids, our churches, that we have to have respect for those that are there. So my sense is that Israel has an issue that it needs to resolve right now in terms of the vandalism question, and different parts of Israeli population that need to be taught some new factors that would help them to understand the idea of toleration much better.
Thank you. My entire offering to this conversation has been one to say that the Christian community has an opportunity in Israel to get its own act together, and I know that there are conversations among the different Christian groups, but to get those conversations focused on the social welfare, the medical, the educational endeavors that around which they can unite and have united, and serve then as an example for the entire state of Israel of how to be a beacon for unity, and then helping Israel to I think find an appropriate identity as that small sliver of land where a true unity for all of humanity can be exhibited, not just as a haven for Jews, but as a true center for three major religious groups representing billions of people across this world.
So part of what gives me hope is that this event, whoever perpetrated it, was roundly condemned by every aspect of Israeli society. There was no one who condoned it, from the president to the chief rabbi to everyone, which is, of course, the right response. In the Talmud, Hillel said, "Im ein ani li mili," if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? Uchshe'ani la'atzmi ma'ani, but if I'm only for myself, then what am I? And the balance between those two questions, I think, is the one that Israel has to figure out how to answer. There has been 2,000 years of history of trauma that the Jewish people pass on generation to generation, from the quashing of revolts to living in exile to crusades to Inquisition, expulsion, pogrom, Holocaust. And what Israel needs to do is to not succumb to passing on that pathology of the abused to then become the abuser. We need to break that cycle of pathology so that we take the abuse of our history and channel that energy into a new pathway forward that exhibits understanding and curiosity and tolerance, so that Israel is the Jewish state that it was promised to be, a place that Isaiah imagined would be a light to the nations, that will be a beacon. There is a strong sense among many, many Israelis that it's not just enough for Israel to be a normal country, but that Israel needs to be a shining example of what Judaism has always taught, which is to be not just a regular society, but a holy society. And a holy society is one in which there is appreciation for all of the citizens of that society. Though Israel now has an administration that has invited the far right into the governing powers, it behooves those governing powers to moderate their stances so that the minorities that they now control, whether they be Palestinian Arabs or the world's Christians, are protected and safe in the Holy Land in the modern state of Israel.
Thank you. What a complex conversation. I've been trying to think what I can add to this. And you know, I think the hope does lie in the fact that this was roundly condemned by multiple groups. But as we know, this challenge we're talking about is not isolated just to Israel. Every time we turn on the news, no matter what country it is, there seems to be this hatred that comes out in violence and aggression from certain parts of the population for various reasons. And that's something that we all need to address, how we as faith communities can move beyond and above that. Last thing I'll say is that at my university, Andrews University, we have an international center for trauma education. I don't claim to be a trauma expert by any means, but just listening to the reports from some of them talking about it, we talk about the trauma at an individual, but often we don't actually focus on the trauma of a community. Traumas of community that are created through something catastrophic that has happened, or something through many, many years. But the impact on the community we cannot overlook. And I think that is a responsibility when we look at situations like this, whether it's in Israel or elsewhere, where there is trauma. People instinctively act maybe in certain ways. And it needs a lot to move past that to maybe take a higher ground. The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we do believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory but in reality. And so now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.